on the lack of physical communication within interpersonal relationships, specifically for male partners and the connection they might have with male suicide. Now just a brief overview as to what interpersonal relationships are or what they look like. It's a strong, deep, close association that you have with another person. It could be either with a partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, mate, or it could be with a family, family relationship. Human beings are innately social and are shaped by their experiences with others. Relationships are key in how individuals are developed, making close interactions with loved ones or platonic relationships very important. Now, for physical communication, in regards to it, I am not going to be talking about aggressive forms of physical communication. I'm going to specifically talk about intimacy, so no punching. Physical intimacy can be exchanged between people, but is often used to communicate positive and intimate feelings. It can also be sensual proximity, touching, hugging, kissing, holding hands, anything that you see yourself doing with a partner. That's what physical communication I'm talking about. This ties heavily to interpersonal relationships, and not specifically, and not touching or physical communications between strangers. So this is between partners, people that are close to you. Now, we can see the lack of physical communication as early as infancy. According to Stern, we do handle our male infants differently from how we handle our female infants. Male infants tend to be touched more frequently during the first 3 months, but they're also handled more roughly in the first 3 months. According to Taguchi's study, higher rates of mortality were seen in infants who either received brief or no touching from nurses. So he confirmed that the role of interpersonal touch in social and emotional development is of the same importance as the need for food. So this could be due to how we view boys and girls, gender norms. We have to handle our male infants because we want them to be tough, we want them to be strong, but we handle our females more gently because, we just have to be girls. And this shows that there is already a significant difference with how we handle gender at an early age. So, adolescents who lack interpersonal closeness with their parents have a higher chance of depression and development of suicidal tendencies. Taguchi also found that a lower frequency of parental touching during childhood influences the development of depression and can contribute to poor image of an individual's romantic partner during later adolescence and early adulthood. So not only does childhood, infancy, adolescent touching with a parent influence you in those younger years, it can also influence your relationships later that you develop as an adult. So, non-human primates use physical communication as a form of communication which is key for their survival. Non-human primates, specifically apes, as you can see in the photo, communicate using physical intimacy or interaction, and this helps developing relationships and with reducing stress. According to Savieto, apes, like humans, are social animals and rely strongly on family units and close interaction. Touch signifies communication that strengthens their bond, which in turn improves their trust and reliance on each other, which is key for their survival in the wild. Cultures play a significant role in how we view gender norms. Some cultures are going to be more accepting of how males or females physically interact with each other, whereas that same interaction would not be approved of in another culture. However, in Western cultures, this differs from non-Western cultures, specifically because of the Western ideologies. The general rule of grouping suggested by Hall was that the geographical locations with Southern European, Latin American, and Arabian countries, these were known as the contact cultures, whereas North America, Northern Europe, and Asian populations being the non-contact cultures. So what is the connection here? We see globally that males have higher suicide rates than females, and we also see in Western cultures that male populations have higher suicide rates than females too. Hawkins' study examined suicide rates in 15 to 24-year-olds between males and females in European countries, and in contrast with attempted suicide, suicide rates are generally higher in male populations than in the female populations. And the highest suicide rates are also found in older age groups. Again, we have the same according to the World Health Organization, the highest rates of suicide are seen in European countries, whereas the largest of suicides are found in Asia. But this is probably more due to the region and population density rather than Western cultures also have higher suicide rates than other regions around the world. When comparing what regions had higher rates, we saw in the Western cultures. So, for women, being physically intimate is socially acceptable in many countries as a form of being feminine, and this approach of communication is a way to form emotional bonds. Simple touches including hugging, touching, or even hand-holding. We know that young girls, we kiss each other on the cheek, that's fine. But the same kind of relationship is not acceptable for young boys. For men, being physically intimate is generally not socially acceptable. As far as it goes, greet one another, hold hands. Or not hold hands. That'd be nice. Shaking hands. Due to this lack of physical communication that strengthens one's ability to connect, it is possible that there may be a link between this to depression and possible suicide. These two very different ways of communication, one with physical intimacy, the other one without, can possibly explain half of the population being cheated of this form of communication. So, my hypothesis, countries, specifically with Western ideologies that are socially unaccepting of physical intimacy and relationships containing male figures, are going to have higher rates of suicide within their male population. So, for my study, I did a cross-correlation study. I compared the statistics by the World Health Organization mortality database, and as you can see, that's just a handful of them. They actually had a list of 90 countries. I used 25, and it's per 100,000 persons of ages between 15 and 19, so those numbers are going to be drastically higher in other age groups. Once I pull the stats from the WHO database, I then use it to compare with the statistics from the global comparison study of accepted touch. This study measured in centimeters accepted touch within interpersonal relationships that you can see on the far right. They also did compare social distance with strangers and acquaintances, and then interpersonal distances, so boyfriends, girlfriends, partners, mates. I took the mean values of intimate distances and correlated with the countries that could be found in the WHO database, which is what the 25 countries were. So basically, I compared the countries that were found in each study. And this is a list of the countries that I used. You can see how many male per female that were listed. All right, so in their study, Sarah Kauska and her team predicted that age would be a significant factor of personal and intimate distances. That was the study. Previous research suggested that older people prefer distance with strangers and acquaintances. Their findings were consistent with previously observed outcomes. Overall, younger people are more accepting of being touched by strangers than older people, which agrees with previous theories. Possibly this is a result of changing times, norms are being more accepted across generations in regards to physically touching people. They also predicted that older people and women would prefer greater distances with acquaintances. Based off of their results and their discussion, that could mean that there is a positive relationship between women's accepted intimacy and men's accepted intimacy. Now, so what can we conclude from this? This study shows that Western cultures have higher suicide rates and have less acceptable exposure to physical communication in the male population. Gender roles and cultural norms greatly influence the stigma set against males and continue to handicap our male gender. As seen in non-human primates, physical intimacy is necessary for survival, but when only half of the population is getting a specific form of communication, this important aspect of primal instinct, males will be incapable of developing. Unfortunately, suicide is commonly seen as a cultural taboo and is often not reported accordingly and accurately, making it difficult to compare current numbers. But, however, this simply means that suicide is worse than what has been reported to the WHO database. Further research into expanding on accurately reporting suicide is necessary in order to accomplish psychological treatments for suicidal tendencies and to expand resources necessary for those who are trying to get help and cannot access getting treatment. This study, I love this photo. This study could alter the way these gender norms are constructed, which in turn could socially benefit the male gender as a whole. Rather than alienating half of our population, there could be physical inclusion. Using women as an example, we see how immensely different and how accepted women's intimacy is versus men's intimacy, and they have a lower suicide rate. Starting as soon as they are born, women they're able to access the specific physical form of communication. This could change for how males interact. As again, we saw as soon as infancy begins, there's already a significant change or difference in how they are interacting with each other, or how they interact with their parents and their relationships afterwards. This could also lead to understanding how closely linked touch is to brain development. The implications could lead to further research into how brain chemicals activated through physical communication influence psychological development. How denial of the development of certain chemicals such as oxytocin, which is known as the love drug, and you admit it when you hug somebody, if you develop that as early as infancy, but you see that in females but not in males, how does that influence infant brains all the way up into adult brains? Or kind of a huge shift there. In fact, this hormone plays a role in pair bonding. So you see that in birth and breastfeeding and relationships develop after that. So by altering these Western ideologies about how males experience and express physical communication, we could decrease the suicide rate. Questions? Questions?
All right, so questions?
I have a question. What does physical touch communicate that words cannot?
Very good question. Well, obviously with verbal communication, you're going to be able to relay what you're thinking. Physical touch, you don't have communication, so are you talking in specific to
Just like maybe like hugging, holding hands even, stuff like that.
Well, if I hold hands with somebody, I'm going to obviously have a connection to that person. I'm going to feel a bond with them. I'm going to be more accepting to developing a relationship, whereas if I, hey, can I hold your hand? Or we're holding hands kind of metaphorically, it probably doesn't process the same way. So physical communication also reinforces connection, whereas sometimes you don't get that with verbal communication.
So when you started out, you said that you were looking mainly at familial relationships and like intimate, like partner relationships. Could you speak a little to the role that friendships, like perhaps within the same sex or gender, play into this?
Well, actually, friendships were included with interpersonal relationships. So it's just intimacy between two people that's not going to be found if you're just a stranger or an acquaintance.
I have a question about suicide. Western cultures are more have higher rates of suicide. Was that on your WHO slide? Or did you have some data about which cultures have more suicide?
Yes, the WHO database, the study that pulled all of their statistics in 90 countries, they were the ones that said that they saw those numbers.
Have you ever looked to see whether those are more in colonial countries? Because I know that the highest rates of suicide, I believe, at least in the United States and Canada, are amongst indigenous populations, colonized indigenous populations. I was just wondering if you take out indigenous people from those populations, if there's still that difference. I know that wasn't part of your research. It was just a thought about the way we measure suicide in culture.
That's actually a really good question, and that might tie to cultural taboo. Also with indigenous populations, if they might have those higher suicide rates because of Western ideologies that have been forcefully take over their land and stuff. So those two interacting with each other could possibly be why they have the mentioned in the research.
All right, any other questions? All right.
Got that mom and infant prop you